Welcome to this week's Bible study. This week's Bible study is on the book of Esther, and the book of Esther is such a wonderful book. It's part fairy tale, part mystery. Hans Christian Andersen and John Grisham may be put together in a sense, and written as well, or actually better than either of them even can write. I would encourage you to read the book for yourself. It's only 10 chapters. But let me just give you a thumbnail sketch to remind you of the story. It takes place in Persia. And Esther is the cousin of a man named Mordecai, and they are both Jews who are living in Persia during one of the Jewish diasporas. And they at least Mordecai does not hide the fact that he's a Jew, but they also don't do a whole lot of advertising it either. It can be dangerous to be a Jew during that time and period. Now, the king was King Ahasuerus at the time, and I should mention that the whole book of Esther is this great, big, exaggerated story. Lots of the stuff it says is intentionally exaggerated. It's almost supposed to be funny, although it does have, of course, very important message for us as well. And Ahasuerus is the king, and he's really a pretty major jerk. He gives this 1,000-day party for all of his friends, and they are drinking and they're eating. He's just showing off all of the wealth of his kingdom, how much alcohol he can bring and how much food he can bring and all of the stuff that he has. And during a part of this party, he asks his wife Vashti to come in. Now, he's not just simply asking Vashti to come in and say hi to his guests. What he really wants to do is for her to come in naked. And he wants to show her off. Not only do I own all of these amazing things, but look at my wife and look how much I own her and how beautiful she is and how much you should be envious of me. Well, Vashti very wonderfully just says, no, I'm not going to participate in that. And the book says that she is just put away. There's no indication that she was killed, but she's gone from the story. The king is just through with her. But now he wants another queen, not because he needs the companionship, probably he just wants something else to show off maybe. And so he says he wants to see all of the fine maidens in the land. And so they are all brought to the palace, including Esther, Mordecai's cousin. Now, before Esther goes, and she's just kind of swept up into this, she doesn't really have the choice, but before she goes, Mordecai warns her, don't let anyone know that you're a Jew. It could go badly for you there, so you need to hide your identity. So she's swept up in the palace. Day after day after day, different women are brought before the king, and so that he can decide whether they will be the one, she will be the one who will be his new bride, until he sees Esther. And as soon as he sees Esther, he knows she is the one, and she is selected, and she becomes Queen Esther. And along with that comes all of the trappings of being a queen, the beautiful clothes and the jewels, and being the fine food, and almost being worshipped. All of that she gets by being queen. Well, there is a man who is one of Ahasuerus' henchmen, you would almost say, Haman, a very evil man. And he is tremendously jealous of Mordecai because Mordecai has found favor with the king. And so he hatches a plan. Haman knows that Mordecai is a Jew, and so he tricks Ahasuerus into creating an edict that says that all of the Jews on a particular day of the month of the year will be killed. I mean, he's asking for genocide because he is jealous of this one guy. Well, the Jews read the edict. They know about it as well as the rest of the country does, and they are just mortified. And Mordecai tears his clothes and puts on sackcloth, and then he sends for Esther and says to Esther, you need to go before the king, and you need to reveal yourself to him and convince him not to commit this act of genocide. And Esther's initial response is fear. I can't go before the king. Just as Vashti refused to come before the king when she was summoned, it also was illegal to come before the king if you were not summoned. And if you came into his presence, you were not summoned. He had to hold out his golden scepter. And if he did not hold out his golden scepter, you would be killed for having the temerity to come before the king without being asked to come. And so she says, I can't do that. I'll die. And Mordecai says two things that I think are just wonderful. And you may know one of the little trivia pieces about the book of Esther is the word God is never in the book. God is in there, but God is always in the background. We never actually see God working. We just see the effects of God at work. But Mordecai says to Esther, well, if you don't, help for our people will come from some other quarter. And Mordecai is simply saying God has plans for our people, and God will not let our people be exterminated. Help will arise from another quarter, but it won't go well for you if you don't do that. And his warning there is a warning for us as well. Even when we are afraid to act, oftentimes it is not acting that is more dangerous than acting in the way that we are supposed to. To not act when God calls us to act is much more dangerous than to act when we are acting under the guidance of the Lord. And so he tells Esther this, and then he says that wonderful phrase that is kind of the key verse of the whole book. Who knows but that perhaps you were raised to this royal position for just such a time as this? Well, Mordecai's words, or perhaps the influence of the Lord, works on Esther, and she changes her mind, and she says to Mordecai, tell all of our people to pray and to fast, and then I will go and do this thing. And so the people begin praying and fasting, and then on the appointed day that Esther chooses, she goes before the king. And there's this moment just pregnant with suspense where she's standing in front of the king. Will he lower his scepter or not? You can almost imagine the servants there with swords or spears ready to run them through her if he does not extend that scepter. But the king extends out his scepter. And then this begins a long and complicated plan that Esther has to eventually unmask Haman as the one who wants to exterminate not only Mordecai and all of the Jews, but even his own queen, Queen Esther. And when the plot is finally revealed and the twist of the tale comes, the king, instead of having the Jews executed, he has Haman executed, hung on the 50-foot gallows. And that's another one of these great exaggerations, but hung on the 50-foot gallows that Haman had erected in order to hang Mordecai. It is Haman who is hung on the gallows. And then the 10th chapter essentially ends like many fairy tales do, and they all lived happily ever after. And we can believe whether that was literally true or not, but it's a wonderful, wonderful tale. But it's not simply a good story for us. It's a story that has much to tell us. And I want to suggest two ways maybe, even though I know there are many others, that it helps us understand our faith and helps us know how we are to act. And the first thing I would suggest, particularly in this Advent season, is that in a sense, Esther is a wonderful prefigure for the figure of Jesus. Esther is one in the palace. She is one who is safe in the palace. Haman does not know that she is a Jew. The day that comes when all the Jews are killed, Esther will not be killed because nobody knows that she is a Jew. And yet she chooses to put her own life at risk for the life of the common folk, for the life of her people, whom she knows will suffer if she doesn't. And that is a wonderful prefigure for Christ. Christ is in heaven with God. Christ is God. As Paul writes, Christ could count equality with God as something to be grasped. And yet in spite of that, as Paul tells us, he humbled himself and became obedient even to the point of death. And unlike Esther, Jesus knows going into this that Satan will not extend the scepter. Satan will not save Jesus from death, but instead Satan will kill Jesus. But that's actually part of the plan. Jesus dies for his people, and then God, of course, raises him from the dead. And so during this Advent, when we're thinking about the coming of Christ, we recognize that God comes from the palace, even though he doesn't have to. He comes from the palace where it was safe, where he was in riches and grandeur, and comes to earth in order to save us. And he saves us not only by risking his life, by giving his life to us. And so the story of Esther even magnifies, in a sense, the story of Jesus. I think Esther also is a tale for us as well. Now, I doubt that anyone that I am speaking to here over the camera is a person of nobility, and you probably don't have the ability to save all of your people by going before the king or someone in power and saving them, and yet it still is a story for us. Because I think the question that Mordecai asks is a question that we all should ask of ourselves. Who knows? But that you weren't raised, and of course, by implication there, by God, to such a place, such a time, such a position as this, for just such a time as this. And I want to give you an illustration, and you see me shifting already because I'm a little anxious about this, because I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, because I'm not. What I'm actually doing is offering to God just thanksgiving for the position to which God has raised me. And it is actually why I wanted to film here on my back porch with my pastor in the background here. Because in many, many ways, for many, many years, although I didn't see it coming, God was preparing, I think, this place for me and for Lee, for our family. Not simply to be a place where we could enjoy, and a place that would be a place that would bring us a lot of safety and security and happiness, which it does, all of those things, but because God wanted us to be able to use it for God's glory. I think that God got me into horses, not so that I would enjoy horses as much as I do, although I think there's something in there too. I think God enjoys and delights in watching me delight in the things that I enjoy doing and in delighting in the gifts that God has given me. But God also says, how are you going to use those for me? And Lee and I, from the very first time that we got this place, bought this place, decided we really want to, in as many ways as we can, make sure that we're giving back to God some of what God has given to us through this place. We have been so fortunate. We made some investments early in our marriage, and we're fortunate with those investments, and that meant that we were able to afford this place. We were able to buy this place, and were called to First Cumberland at a time when real estate prices were low, unlike the way they've been the last few years, and we kind of bought the place for a song. We couldn't afford it if we were trying to buy it today. In so many ways, they could be seen as just coincidences, but we see them as God working with us so that we could have this place. And yet we know that God wants us to use it. And so we've tried to. And you've heard me talk about it before. We've had all kinds of church groups, senior citizens groups, youth groups, our children's group, this kind of thing. A Presbyterian group came up once. I've wanted them to come up and ride horses and enjoy the farm. One of the biggest ways we have done this is through Bridge, and we've been able to let many urban youth, and then more recently through the Bethlehem Center as well, for them to come. A few months ago, we were able to have refugees from around the world, including Ukrainian refugees, come and spend an afternoon riding horses. And that's a very small sacrifice on our part, but we're able to do it, and we are able to see the wonderful smiles that it brings to people's faces. And every time it happens, we just say, we're so thankful that we're able to share this place. And again, please don't hear this as bragging. This is me saying, thank you, God, for raising me up to this place, for giving me this place. And please, God, help me be worthy in just a small way so that I can give this place up for other people. One really quick story about one of the ways that it happened. Not too long ago, a few weeks ago, the Bethlehem Center brought out a group of kids, and one of the boys that came out was just having a bad day, and I'm not sure what was going on, but he got off the bus and he was just mad, and he just crossed his hands and dropped his head, and we were all kind of going around telling each other our names, and I was kind of leading that, and when I got to him, he just wouldn't speak to me. He wouldn't tell me his name. And so someone else told me his name, and so I said, I don't remember his name now, but I said, well, I'm so glad that you're here. I hope you're going to have a good day today. And he just wasn't having any of it, and he just kept his head down. Well, the first thing we always do with the kids is talk to them a little bit about horses, kind of horse 101, and then we bring a horse or two over and let them feed the horses carrots, and that gets them exposed to the horses. And so the kids just love it. They're terrified at first, and then when the horse takes the carrot, they're just so excited, and it's so fun, and then they just want to feed and feed and feed. Of course, the horses are more than happy to oblige them with that. But this kid wasn't having any of it. He was standing back. He wasn't interested in feeding any stupid horse. He didn't want to be here. This wasn't going to happen. So then we make our way out to our little arena where we do the riding of the horses, and the Bethlehem Center staff made him go out there. You got to stay with the group, even if you don't want to ride horses, you have to go out there. And so we went out there, and finally he just kind of kicked his foot on the ground and said, well, I guess if I'm here, I may as well ride a horse. And so he begrudgingly put on a helmet, and he got on the horse, and we started to go. And I've got a regular little pattern that I now have with the kids when I'm taking them on the horse, and I explain to them how the horse wants them to be a good leader, and they need to be a good leader, and the horse is looking for good leadership out of them, because I'm trying to teach them a little bit about leadership in this process. And so we're going along, and after just 2 or 3 minutes, I can take the horse off of the lead line and let the kid control the horse by themselves, and our horses are just amazing. I mean, these are race horses. They are trained to go as fast as they can go with a person on their back when we are in a riding tower or an endurance race out in the woods. But they have learned, and maybe we've taught them, but I just think a lot of it is their character. They have learned that when there's a child on their back in the arena, this is not a race. This is a time to walk and be gentle, and they are. And so I was walking next to this kid, and I said, okay, I want you to practice. Now I want you to show me that you can stop him. And so he pulls the reins back, and the horse just stops. And this is when the magic happens, because all of a sudden the kid realizes this horse is listening to me. And then I say, okay, now I want you to start him. And you just squeeze your legs, just tap a little bit his belly with your feet, and he squeezes and taps, and the horse starts walking, and this huge smile gets on his face. And then I have the kids circle a barrel a couple of times, telling the horse to go in a circle all around the barrel by pulling that rein on that side to pull him around the barrel. And the kid looked at me and he said, I thought when I was coming out here today this was going to be boring. This isn't boring. This is the most fun I've ever had. Now, I'm thrilled I got to give that kid the chance to have the most fun he's ever had, but I hope he learned a little bit about taking a chance, a little bit about overcoming a bad attitude, and I hope he also learned a little bit about leadership as well. And I'm so thankful that if that happened, that God gave me the opportunity just by doing this tiny little thing, and we are risking so little by doing this. Now, I should say that some of our horse friends have told us we're crazy to do this, that we're exposing ourselves to all kinds of liability, and we do have a permission slip that the kids' parents are to sign, and we had lawyers look at the permission slip, but they've said, now just because they sign a permission slip, anybody can sue anybody. And just because they've signed a permission slip doesn't mean that you might not lose a lawsuit. We could lose everything by having people come out here. And Lee and I had to talk about it, and we've decided that it's worth the risk. We don't really feel like we're risking that much by doing what we're doing, but we know we're risking something. But if we were to lose it all, I hope that we'd be able to say, but at least we were acting under what we thought God was calling us to do. And again, I just have to say once again, I'm not trying to brag. I'm just so thankful that I'm able to do this. And I hope that there are other ways in my life that I also am using what God has given me, being willing to risk to do things. And even more importantly, I hope that maybe the story of Esther will help all of us renew our efforts at recognizing and asking ourselves that question, what was it that you were raised to this point in time that God is calling you to do? How is God calling you to risk? How is God calling you to use what you have, who you are, the position you're in, for the glory of God? And let us make sure that we do it remembering Mordecai's words that to not act might even be more dangerous than to act. And of course, we do these things because we know that through Jesus Christ, who came from heaven to earth to be with us, who left the Holy Spirit with us, it is through Him that all things are possible. And it is through Him that we do these things, indeed, because God is with us.